All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. For those of you who joined us early or right on time, we while we wait for a few more folks to join us, we have a survey that we'd love for you to take. You do need to take this survey in a different browser, so you can use your phone, the camera on your phone, to scan the QR code, or you can click or copy the link that Tarina has put in the chat into a separate browser. So this survey is on minty.com, and you'll either be asked to enter a code, which is the number on the screen, 4254685, um, or to click on the link and go straight to the survey. And this first question that we're asking all of you is to assist us in knowing if you would like, if anyone would benefit from having a little bit of an overview of how to use Zoom. So the answer to this question is an important one because it kind of directs where we go with some of our slides. So welcome to those of you who have just joined us for the San Carlos Climate Action Workshop. We are inviting you right now to get settled, make sure your mute is on, and to join us for a short 4-question survey or poll using menti.com. On the slide, we offer you a few different ways to access this survey. If you're having any trouble at all, please do let us know in the chat. You should be able to send a chat to one of our co-hosts this evening, who's titled Zoom Questions Ask Me, and you should also be able to put questions into the chat. So while we're taking the survey, I wanted to go over a couple housekeeping items. We do want to let you all know that tonight's workshop is being recorded. This recording will be placed online on the city's project website for viewing later by those of you who are here with us tonight, or for others who weren't able to join us to see the same information. This workshop also offers a live transcript or a closed captioning, so you should be able to see the subtitles at the bottom of your screen. If you're only seeing, if you're not seeing the subtitles and you would like to, hit the live transcript button in the toolbar at the near the bottom of your screen, and you should have the option to show subtitle. If you don't want to see it, you select hide subtitle. And right now you are only able to see the first question on the Zoom poll. So I'm going to go ahead and take us to the next one. We'd like to know if you are joining us for the first time, or if you've participated in other activities related to the San Carlos Climate Mitigation and Adaptation Plan. Okay, some of you are responding, so I can see that this question is available to you. All right, so we've got a range in participation previous to tonight. And so we also have a couple open-ended questions for you. And you know, I'll leave this one here for you all to answer for the moment. It's, what is the most important climate action for the city of San Carlos? This is an open-ended question. You should be able to type your response into the space and you'll be able to see everyone's response as well. We'll come back to this and share this after the presentation. All right. So I see that that is working. So thank you for participating in our survey. And it does appear that we will be moving forward without a Zoom overview based on the responses. But if you have any questions or need anything related to how, Zoom, please do let us know. Okay, and so there's been a request to put the survey in the chat for everyone. We do have the link to take that survey. And it's the question that we are putting to you all is, what is the most important climate action for San Carlos to take? And you will be able to talk a bit more about this in your groups later as well. Okay. And then we do have one question that also, there's a follow-up question. If you're still taking that, what actions are you taking to support the community's climate action goals? So this is a little different, focusing on actions that you might be taking that are aligned with the community's goal to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. All right, so Eli, I think we can go to the next slide. So I do want to welcome you all again to our City of San Carlos Climate Action Workshop. I'm Tammy Seal with PlaceWorks, a consultant to the city in support of the preparation of the city's climate mitigation and adaptation plan. And it's my honor tonight to introduce and welcome Mayor Laura Palmer Lohan, who has some remarks to share with us. Mayor, we just need to unmute you.
That was the best speech ever. I'm so sorry you missed it. Hi, everybody. Laura Palmer Lohan, Mayor of San Carlos. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for this very important conversation. Hopefully someday soon, we'll be able to resume our conversations in person. But in the meantime, this has actually proven to be a really great format because it does actually foster really great engagement from the community. We strive tonight to generate a discussion and promote community engagement regardless of the circumstances. We recognize the necessity of taking local action to solve large-scale problems such as climate change. As we've seen with the coronavirus pandemic response, our local governments and institutions play a key role in serving our communities to address issues that are bigger than any one community. In San Carlos, we are lucky to have many partners to help us serve San Carlins. We look forward to discussion on possible actions we can take to address climate change across sectors like energy, transportation, land use, and waste management that will foster a more sustainable community. At the same time, we want to better understand how San Carlins and San Carlos is vulnerable to some of the hazards posed by climate change, such as extreme heat, wildfires, and sea level rise, and to proactively identify strategies to adapt to these threats. The ultimate goal of this type of long-term strategic planning is to foster a sustainable community while enhancing the quality of life we have all come to enjoy in the City of Good Living. Thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to the presentation and group discussion. And I'll hand it back to Tammy Seal with PlaceWorks to start the presentation. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mayor. All right, and we're gonna jump right to it. So we have a full agenda for you all this evening. We're really excited to have this time with you. We very much appreciate you sharing your part of your evening with us. So we have a presentation where we'll go over the climate mitigation and adaptation plan, provide an update on the work that the project team has done to date, including an overview of the outreach that we had last year, and provide a bit of information about where we're headed next, which is to prepare draft climate mitigation and adaptation strategies. After the presentation, we'll have an opportunity for a short question and answer period. And then we're going to transition to breakout room discussions, where we hope you'll be able to spend about 40 minutes with your neighbors talking about draft strategies for us to include in the plan. We've reserved time for us to come back together and report back our conversations. And after that, we'll wrap up and convene out to do some work. So that's our agenda tonight. As a reminder, if you have questions related to the project as we're going through the presentation, please do send those to me in the chat. I am labeled project questions, ask me Tammy. So please do send those to me. If you have any questions related to Zoom, please send those questions to Zoom questions, ask me. And those questions will go to Tarina. And I think we do have a great project team here with us tonight, a team of city staff and our PlaceWorks consultant team. You'll get to know a couple of folks when you're in your breakout room. So we're joined by our Assistant City Manager, Tara Peterson, and the sustainability team, Adam Lacar, Nicole McDonald, Brian Carey. And from PlaceWorks, you have myself, Eli Crispy, who will be giving our presentation tonight, Jacqueline Protzman and Tarina Wilson, who will help in the breakout rooms. And I will, at this point, see if I can share some results. This is always the test here. So I will do a screen share. And we'll take a look at what we heard. So can we all see the Mentimeter results? Okay, so when we asked what actions are you taking to support community climate action goals, we see a nice range of responses here that include putting solar panels on rooftops, reducing waste, riding bikes, driving electric cars, energy efficient upgrades, changing landscaping, advocacy for climate action. It looks like we see some folks who are changing out their natural gas appliances with efficient electric appliances like heat pump water heaters. We see more folks who are changing their transportation habits. So this is a great start. We hope that you'll be able to share more about your individual actions with us when you're in the breakout group tonight. And when we come back after the breakout room discussion at the end of the meeting, I will share the results from the other open-ended question that asked what you all think should be the priorities for the city. Okay, so now I think we can get into our presentation. Thanks, Eli. So first, just to get started, for those of you who might be new to our project, the city currently has a climate action plan that was adopted in 2009 as part of the city's last update of the general plan. So the current climate action plan is what we call a strategic plan to reduce community-wide greenhouse gas emissions. It included a goal that the city's community-wide greenhouse gas emissions would be reduced by 15%, 50% below the baseline emissions, which were those noted for the year 2005 by 2020. And when, as the city has checked in on its inventory, checked in on its emissions through regular inventories, it's been on track to meet that target. And Eli is going to talk a bit more about the community's greenhouse gas emissions. So we can go to the next slide. This project, the Climate Mitigation and Adaptation Plan, is an update and an expansion to the Climate Action Plan. It's meant to ensure that the city continues to be consistent with state laws and guidance related to reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. So we'll be including greenhouse gas reduction goals for the years 2030 and 2050. We're updating all the technical analysis, and we're expanding the plan to not only identify the potential climate changes, impacts, and vulnerability to the community, but to include goals and policies that support climate adaptation and resilience. And this plan is a project subject to the California Environmental Quality Act, and it will include an environmental review consistent with the CEQA guidelines. So that's an overview of the plan. We started the project last year. We have modified the schedule to be responsive to the changing conditions around us. As you know, we've all had a big transition in the past year, and we wanted to ensure that even though we have changed to spending more time apart, socially distanced, we wanted to ensure that we provided ample community engagement. So the project slowed down a little bit, but we are now on track to prepare draft strategies, the content of the plan, through the spring and summer, and to continue with public outreach and engagement during this time. So the climate mitigation adaptation plan will have the targets that we mentioned, like the goals for where we need to be as a community to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. It'll have policies to reduce those emissions to get to the goal, and adaptation and resilience programs, and a very clear implementation program for city staff to follow as well. That's kind of the most important part as we do this, is to think about, to turn all these great big ideas we have into strategic, feasible, and implementable programs for the community and city staff. So now I'd like to turn it over to Eli, who's going to share a bit more with us about the technical work that's been done to date, and then get us set up to talk about strategies.
Thank you, Tammy. Thank you all for joining us. As Tammy mentioned, my name is Eli. I'm going to take a moment to recap some of the technical work that we've done, beginning with the vulnerability assessment. So the vulnerability assessment is a look at how climate change and its associated hazards might affect San Carlos in the future. So to do this assessment, we have looked at 9 different hazards, shown here, and how they might affect 6 different categories of what we're calling populations and assets. These are people, buildings, infrastructure, ecosystems, as well as intangible things like the local economy and key community services. The vulnerability assessment builds on existing studies. It is really meant to help. It is also meant to help support the city's in-progress general plan update by helping to meet some new state requirements. We look at how these different hazards might affect these various populations and assets, and determine which populations and asset might be the most vulnerable or the most susceptible to which potential hazard conditions. Some of the areas of San Carlos are at specific risk of individual hazards, so I want to take a moment to highlight those. Some of the areas near the shoreline are at an elevated risk of sea level rise, and without action, it's possible that some of those areas could be temporarily or even permanently underwater within even a few decades. Some of the areas along the creeks, and especially in some of the low-lying areas a little south of downtown, they may be at risk of increased flooding as a result of climate change. Some of the neighborhoods closer to the hills may face elevated risk of wildfire. And then there are also some hazards like extreme heat or drought conditions that may affect all parts of the city. And more or less everybody would be would face some effects from those hazardous conditions. There is an extensive set of results from the vulnerability assessment that will be included with the Climate Mitigation and Adaptation Plan, or the CMAP. But here are some of the highlights. So as I mentioned, there are some parts of the city that can face both temporary and permanent flooding. Extreme heat and other conditions can contribute to increased health risks for several populations, and that includes many persons who may already have underlying health conditions. There are increases in wildfire frequency and severity, landslides, flood events. These can all create evacuation concerns, and that might be a particular challenge for persons who may already have limited mobility. Buildings, infrastructure, and ecosystems in and around San Carlos may all face a greater risk of harm. And the local energy network is also particularly susceptible to disruption. We've seen some of that already in recent years with the PSPS events. And disruption of energy can have both economic and health impacts. And these are some of the challenges that the CMAP will be looking to address and find a way to boost resiliency to these identified challenges in the vulnerability assessment. With that, I'll transition now to giving an overview of the greenhouse gas inventory. The greenhouse gas inventory is an assessment of the emissions of greenhouse gases, which are the gases that contribute to climate change, an assessment of those gases that are generated by San Carlos or are attributed to the community. So this looks at emissions going back to 2005, which kind of sets the baseline level. And then we've gone back and assessed emissions in the years since 2005, most recently for 2018, to show how those emissions have changed over time. The good news is that those emissions have declined more or less pretty consistently from 2005 levels. So on this graph here, you can see that each of the different colored sections represents a different source of greenhouse gas emissions. And you can see that the total emissions have fallen about 25% as of 2018 relative to 2005 levels, and that most of the individual sections have decreased as well. The major sources of greenhouse gas emissions in San Carlos, the largest one is transportation, which is symboled by the green bar there. Then there is the energy use in residential and non-residential buildings. That's electricity and natural gas. Those are the orange and red bars. And then there are some smaller sources of emissions, which include things like solid waste, water and wastewater, commuter rail, and so on. Once we have the emissions for past years, we can project what they might be in the future. This is what's called the greenhouse gas forecast. And it is based on projections of how San Carlos's population and economy are projected to change over the next few decades, consistent with some of the regional projections. The forecast assumes that no action is taken to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. This is sort of the worst case scenario. And we do this because it really helps to set a baseline for what might be expected if no action is taken. It kind of sets a foundation in that sense. And then from there, we can figure out how do we reduce these emissions to get to where San Carlos would like to be. These are the results of that forecast. So you can see if no action is taken, emissions would be expected to increase by 28% come 2050 relative to 2018 levels. Note that even in that worst case, emissions do still remain below 2005 levels, which is represented by that dotted line at the top of the chart. I should point out here that the 2020 bar, that is a projected forecast of emissions that is not an actual inventory of emissions from the calendar year 2020. And that projection does, as you might expect, not include impacts associated with the pandemic. So we said that in the forecast, it demonstrates emissions if no action were to be taken, no action done to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But we know already that actions have been taken and that those actions are likely to continue and may very well accelerate. So there are several steps that the state has already taken or is planning to take. This includes requiring increased supplies of electricity from renewable sources, greater energy efficiency in new buildings, and greater fuel efficiency in new vehicles that are sold. There have also been several local actions, most notably the introduction of Peninsula Clean Energy a few years ago, but also increases in composting in San Carlos, additional solar panel installation. There are a number of other things, and collectively, these, what we're calling existing and planned efforts at the local, regional, and state level are expected to keep reducing San Carlos's emissions well below what was shown in the forecast. You can see the results of those expected and planned efforts here. So with those efforts in place, San Carlos's emissions in 2030 and 2050 are expected to be even lower than what they were in 2018, and that's despite a projected increase in population. So even though the city's population is expected to grow somewhat, the economy and the number of jobs is expected to grow, but with these existing and planned efforts in place, emissions are expected to continue to decline. So that is some of the technical background behind this project. I'll now turn to talking about some of the next steps, which are the draft policies that would help address greenhouse gas emissions and climate adaptation. So for greenhouse gas emissions, the state has laid out some targets that the state has adopted for reducing the statewide greenhouse gas emissions. Those are shown here. San Carlos does have the choice of adopting these targets or developing other ones that are generally consistent with the state's efforts, but may vary in some of the specifics. The city has not yet set local targets. We want to look at what reduction strategies are feasible, what targets would make sense for the city, what is consistent with city goals and city values. So there are options there that will be identified and fleshed out moving forward with the project. On the climate adaptation side, there aren't any formal targets. However, state law does require that communities address climate change and related hazards. Under state law, communities do have to prepare a vulnerability assessment, as San Carlos has already done, and then to develop adaptation goals, policies, and implementation strategies that help to protect against climate-related hazards following guidance in the state's adaptation planning guide. So the Climate Mitigation and Adaptation Plan will help to support this requirement that the state has put in place for the city. Going back to the greenhouse gas reduction efforts, as we talk about greenhouse gas reduction, there are really two ways to achieve a reduction in those emissions. One is to decrease the amount of the activity that produces the emissions. The other is to decrease what is called the carbon intensity. Let's see, emissions per, if you will, amount of activity of a particular action. So for example, if we want to decrease emissions from driving, the city there are two potential avenues. The city can try to reduce the amount of miles that people are driving. Alternatively, the city can make it so that driving is a less carbon intensive action. So for example, to decrease driving, the city might want to consider changes in land use or make it easier for people to take public transit or to walk or to bike. And then to decrease the carbon intensity of driving, the city might want to promote more fuel efficient vehicles or electric vehicles. In some cases, the city may only be able to affect one of those factors and not both. For the sake of our discussion tonight, we'll be looking at greenhouse gas reduction policies organized in these four categories. Or the greenhouse gas policies will be organized into energy, transportation, land use, and then water, wastewater, and waste. And then adaptation and resiliency will be a fourth category. The CMAP may organize things somewhat differently. The new greenhouse gas reduction policies are going to build on what San Carlos has already done. This is just a sample of what the community has already achieved or what is planned or ongoing. We do want to go beyond these existing policies. We think they'll be necessary to achieve the more sustained and more extensive greenhouse gas reductions that are suggested by the state. But we do want to carry forward existing efforts where it makes sense to do so. And that could include strengthening or modifying these existing actions to achieve even greater reductions. So now I want to take a closer look at some of what San Carlos's major sources are of greenhouse gas emissions, beginning with electricity. Electricity use has gone down somewhat since 2005, but emissions from electricity use have dropped much more substantially, 75% as of 2018. And that is in large part thanks to PCE, Peninsula Clean Energy, because that supplies much more electricity from cleaner sources than PG&E does. By 2045, electricity statewide will be required to be 100% carbon-free. And for those of you that get your electricity from PCE, which is about 98% of San Carlos, your electricity should be carbon-free much sooner than that. PCE, as well as regional groups like BayREN, the Bay Area Regional Energy Network, they all have incentives and other programs to help keep these emissions going down. So we want to support and strengthen those programs through the CMAP. Natural gas use has also gone down since 2005. There largely aren't cleaner sources of natural gas the way there are with electricity, so we don't see as substantive a decline in the greenhouse gas emissions. The city is currently considering an all-electric reach code that, if adopted, that would decrease greenhouse gas emissions by helping to reduce the natural gas use in new buildings. So if that reach code is adopted, the CMAP will look at the greenhouse gas reduction benefits from it and incorporate that into the plan as appropriate. Looking at transportation, even though San Carlos residents did drive more miles in 2018 than they did in 2005, the emissions from transportation have actually gone down. And that's largely thanks to more fuel efficient vehicles and increases in electric vehicles. The state has taken action to keep fuel efficiency going up and to help try to keep these emissions going down. Governor Newsom recently announced the state will be requiring all new vehicles sold in the state to eventually be zero emission. We understand that the Biden administration is also working on addressing these emissions at a federal level. And then there is the other side of transportation emissions, which is about allowing people to be less dependent on cars in the first place. Caltrain, buses, walking, bikes, micromobility, these are all critical components of that step. So the CMAP will be addressing those topics as well. I'll share some quick notes about water, wastewater, and solid waste. San Carlos is using less water now than it used to, despite population growth. And the rise of PCE has helped to reduce emissions that are generated from all the electricity that it takes to move and to process water and wastewater. Emissions from the direct processing of wastewater generation, which occurs at power plants, that has gone up, or which occurs at water treatment plants, that has gone up slightly. But on the solid waste side, we've noted that while emissions, solid waste, and the amount of trash generated by San Carlos has gone up a little from 2010 levels, it is still below where things were in 2005. Water, wastewater, solid waste are not necessarily major sources of greenhouse gas emissions in San Carlos, but they are still part of the overall picture. So the CMAP will be seeking to reduce these emissions where we can. And not to forget about adaptation, I do want to share a few highlights of what the CMAP is looking to be planning for. Extreme heat days, which are a day with a high temperature above about 95 degrees in San Carlos's case, those are expected to increase significantly from an average of about 4 a year historically, potentially as high as 11 by 2050 or even 22 of those days by 2100. As we showed in the map earlier, sea levels are projected to rise potentially as much as 84 inches by 2100, and temporary levels during, say, a strong storm or a king tide event could get even higher than that. Wildfires are expected to increase significantly around San Carlos, potentially 60 to 70%. So the CMAP will be seeking to address all of these issues and the other climate change related hazards that are identified in the vulnerability assessment. And that is, as I mentioned, required by state law. And since the city is also updating relevant sections of the general plan document, we are going to make sure that the CMAP and the general plan are consistent with each other and that they support each other on climate adaptation and, as appropriate, on the greenhouse gas reduction side. So that is sort of an overview of what we've done so far and what we're hoping to do in the next phase. Hopefully that wasn't too confusing to anyone, but if anyone does have any questions, I think we have some time for Q&A, so please feel free to type those questions in and send them through the chat.
Thank you, Eli. So yeah, just a reminder that if you do have questions for us, please do send those in the chat. And if we don't have questions, it's totally fine. I know there was a lot in the presentation. If you were able to join us for a workshop last fall, some of this was in that workshop. And if it's new to you, we understand that it might take a little bit of time to get familiar with some of the terms. So if you do have questions for our project team after tonight, you are welcome to send those to us through by emailing Adam, and we'll have his email address available at the end of the presentation. So we have one question that I believe will be for Adam. And Adam, this is a question about whether there are any restrictions on leaf blowers in the city.
Yeah, thanks, Tammy. You know, to be honest, I don't believe there are. I'm not quite sure on the leaf blower regulations.
Okay.
But
I can answer that. The answer would be no, there are no regulations.
Okay, thanks, Tara. So our we have a couple questions coming in, Eli and Adam, about Peninsula Clean Energy's options. And I don't know if either of you know them off the top, or if we perhaps should put a link in the chat to PCA's website for additional information about their options. But we do know, I believe that about 97% of the accounts in the city are participating, or residential customers are participating in Peninsula Clean Energy's program.
I can make an attempt at answering that. The statistics that we talked about in the presentation, those are for all subscribers. There was a comment, is that just for those opting up to the 100% Eco 100 level, or the 50%, which is standard?
Right.
So that does include everyone. It's worth noting that the 50%, the default Eco Plus level, as of 2019, that was about 52% renewable electricity. But most of the remaining electricity comes from hydroelectric facilities, from large dams. And those also don't generate greenhouse gas emissions. So even if you were at the lowest, the default level, the Eco Plus level in 2019, only about 10% of your electricity actually came potentially from a natural gas power plant or something else that generated greenhouse gas emissions. About 90% of your electricity came from carbon-free sources, even though it may not all have been renewable.
Right. And that is changing every few years as PCE works toward its more aggressive goals. Okay. We have a couple of questions about options for strategies, and that's where we'll direct, that's how we're going to get to talk about in your groups here as soon as we go into breakout groups. So if you're interested in some strategies for leaf blowers or other things, we encourage you to talk more about that in your groups. So I definitely see some concern about the leaf blowers. So we have anticipated that, and we do encourage you to talk about that in your group among many of the other opportunities. And I'm just scanning here to see if we have any other questions. There's a question, Eli, that asked if the current climate action plan anticipated Peninsula Clean Energy, and I think we anticipated PG&E and PG&E's commitment to meet the renewables portfolio standard. And there, I believe, a strategy that supported community choice energy when it became available.
Yes, I believe that's the case. We didn't have PCE specifically because I don't think it was really being evaluated too seriously back in 2009, right, when the current climate action plan was prepared. But yet we did anticipate an increase in renewable electricity as PG&E is required to do by the state, as all utilities are.
Yeah. And we've had a couple of questions asking if we can break out greenhouse gas emissions by natural gas versus electricity. And that is information that we can do that, and that those graphics definitely will be available in when the CMAP is prepared. Eli, I don't know that we have that graphic thought maybe we did, but that's good to know there's an interest there and we can provide that information.
Right, we don't have the graphic, although looking at the numbers, it is my understanding that for both residential and non-residential, particularly with the rise of PCE, a greater proportion of emissions are coming from natural gas compared to electricity.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll do one last question and then make sure we get to the breakout rooms, which is, I think, where we're going to enjoy our time together. Eli, do we, or Adam, do we know how cap and trade policies have influenced what we're seeing in the greenhouse gas emissions inventory update?
Eli, I'm not sure if that was included in the planned activities. Yeah.
It's not directly factored in. The planned activities at the state level that we identified, that's the state renewables portfolio standard, the Title 24 green building standards, standards for clean cars, standards for vehicle and equipment fuel, and the state's zero emission bus mandates. So cap and trade may be involved at multiple levels in those policies, but we haven't specifically been able to break it out, in part because it's a little difficult to forecast exactly how those emissions are going to kind of play out at a statewide level, especially given that San Carlos doesn't have a lot of the large industrial facilities that would be directly affected through cap and trade.
Great, thank you. All right, well, I think that we are ready to go to our breakout groups. And so we're going to go into these groups for about 40 minutes. I see some folks may have already be getting ready for that. So we have currently put you into 4 breakout groups. And you will be joined by, in 3 of your groups, a facilitator and a note taker. And in these groups, your facilitator and note takers are going to share their screens with you and show you some draft ideas for greenhouse gas reduction and adaptation, climate action goals, strategies, and actions. And they're going to be generally organized by the sectors of adaptation and resilience, energy, transportation and land use, and waste and water. And then within each of those, we've kind of broken them up into 2 or 3 groups there. And so with each one, there's a couple, maybe 2 to 4 ideas and a goal. We want to remind you all that these are very draft, they're ideas. They're very much meant to get your feedback. We really want you to engage with us, ask us questions, share any concerns or considerations or support that you have for these ideas. If you have an idea that you do not see, please do share that with us. Our note takers are going to be typing up everything they hear from you. And we also encourage you, while you're in the breakout room, to turn on your video if you don't have that on now, to unmute yourself to engage in the conversation. And also feel free to use your chat when you're in your breakout room. If you have an idea and maybe others are talking and you want to share it right away, you can go ahead and drop that in the chat. Our facilitators are going to make sure that we copy all the chat conversations as well. So I think we can go to the next slide. I believe that covers it. And so this is just an example of what we mean by strategies or goals. But again, these are very draft and they're very much up for discussion, deliberation. This is not, while this might be the first time that you see them, it's absolutely not the last. We do plan to offer these ideas online through a Shape San Carlos activity. So after you leave tonight, you're going to think about this a little bit more, and we're going to let you know when that online survey is available so you can give us any additional thoughts that you have after tonight. Okay, so I don't see any new questions in the chat. So I do want to make sure that my facilitators and note takers have heard that we're going to have 4 groups tonight. And I think that we can go ahead and go into it. Hello, welcome back to the main room. Did you all have a good time in your small group discussions? Great. Thank you. Thanks for sticking with us through those conversations. I'm really I get to go read all the notes that everybody took, so I'm looking forward to that part. All right, so we have just a few minutes. We've reserved 5 to 10 minutes for sharing what we've heard in the small group discussions. So we will ask our facilitators to pop up here. We're going to share the notes of your group, and we've asked each of the facilitators to come and be prepared to share a couple highlights of your conversations. So I believe Adam or Jacqueline will be up for group 1.
Sure, I can do this. Thanks to group 1, we had a great discussion. Thinking about just some highlights here, some climate adaptation thoughts about increasing the use of pervious surfaces or bioswales to kind of manage any sort of stormwater runoff from storms and things like that. And then moving down, there was a talk of a program a while back where the fire department would come door by door and check out and do an assessment of your property and see if make any suggestions. That was particularly popular here as well. And then I think something that came up in the transportation, there was some interest in exploring some micro mobility, some Lime bikes and other scooter rental services as well that some people were interested in. So, but yeah, it was a great discussion.
Thanks, Adam. All right, so now let's switch to group 2. That's going to be Nicole, I believe.
Yep, that's me. So I just jotted down a couple things that stood out in our conversation. The first one being a very straightforward, just increase EV charging availability in the city, whether that be in the downtown area, on residential streets, or multi-unit housing. The second to note is interest in local shuttle access for San Carlos on a smaller scale than our Samtrans system. And then the third being water reduction and conservation education. So remembering that water conservation is important in all years and not just in drought years. So those are just some to note.
All good notes. Thank you. All right, group 3. That's Brian.
Yes.
All right, hey, Brian.
Yes, and thank you to group 3 for a great discussion. I know we bounced around quite a bit from topic to topic, but just a couple of the highlights that were mentioned right off the bat. It was talked about emphasizing very quantifiable, data and strategies and goals, making sure that we are chasing after things that we can quantify and know where we've made progress. And in the transportation sector, one of the things that we talked about was really being aware of many of the obstacles that people face who are living in multifamily housing, specifically related to EV charging and access to EV charging. And then we talked a lot about zero waste and placing an emphasis on an opt-in rather than an opt-out program when it comes to, for example, all of the knickknacks that come with our takeout food, the utensils, the napkins, the hot sauce and ketchup packets and all of those things. And really just placing the emphasis on an opt-in where we're specifically asking for those things so that they don't go to waste.
I think if we did that, I'd have an extra drawer in my kitchen. That's where all that stuff goes. All right, thank you. And we have one more group, group 4, Eli.
Yes, so thank you to group 4. It was also a great discussion. We had a chance to get pretty in depth on some of these topics. In addition to a lot of what some of the other groups already discussed, one thing we wanted to keep in mind was making sure we were concentrating development in areas that were at lesser risk of hazard conditions, and making sure that the policies in the CMAP aren't contradicting each other. So if we want to concentrate infill development and put it downtown, we also want to make sure that those new buildings aren't going in places that might be prone to sea level rise or flooding. We talked about restoring permeable surfaces, requiring more of those, not only to reduce the urban heat effect and contribute to extreme heat events, but also to promote less flooding and more groundwater recharge. We also talked about, in addition to the all-electric reach code that is pending before the City Council, we thought about how do we get all-electric into existing developments? And can we require natural gas appliances to be phased out when they reach the end of the operational life and be replaced with electric ones? Also keeping in mind that any requirements for existing buildings should be mindful of persons with limited incomes, and are there special incentives or other programs that we could put into place or could support to help reduce any cost barriers.
Thank you. It sounds like you all had really engaging and thoughtful discussions tonight. So thank you again for that. I did want to, I said I would go back to the Mentimeter poll before we wrapped up tonight. And for this one question, what is the most important climate action for the city? We had a little glitch with this slide. So I apologize if some of you went to it and were told that it was closed. So I did reopen it. So if you went back to it, you would have been able to give an answer there. So I'll do a really quick share of those results. And we can see here that, I think this is what these are ideas that you all shared back with us. Quantifiable pathway. I can tell you that your PlaceWorks team probably should wear a button that what we always ask is it quantifiable? So we're with you on that. Motivation for electric vehicle conversion. And, that seems to be a big theme here. And I can tell there's a lot of concern about gas leaf blowers and a need for everyone to be to have incentives to move forward on environmentally friendly behavior. So, we appreciate that you were all able to join us tonight. And I wanted just to kind of, again, be able to share these results. We'll have these results also combined with the workshop results that we will share online in a few weeks. So I am going to stop sharing so that, Eli, I think we just want to put a slide up here that provides our next steps. So we have some work to do on our end. We, as I just mentioned, we will summarize the meeting and put it in a memo for Adam and Tara and the team, and they'll make that available online as we did before. We will also let you all know when these questions are also put on Shape San Carlos, which is an online survey tool. If you're not familiar with it, it's a way for you to kind of move through the questions we asked you at your own pace. And so if you registered for this workshop and opted in to receive communications from the city, you'll know when this Shape San Carlos survey related to climate action is available. And as we're collecting this information, we're going to be working to prepare these strategies and to prepare the climate mitigation and adaptation plan. And in a few months, we'll have a public review draft out for you all to discuss with us and share your feedback. So in the meantime, we encourage you to stay engaged with us. As I mentioned, if you opted in, you'll be on the city's website. or the city's email list, and you can always check back at the website to see how the project is progressing. And I dropped in the link to that project website in the chat. So if you haven't been there before, copy that site and go there. We've got some nice materials for you. There's a few handouts that summarize much of what was in Eli's presentation this evening, if you want to go back over some of that before as you think about it. So again, thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate, even if we only get to see your faces on video, we really appreciate seeing you here. We know there are a lot of demands on your time. We definitely look forward to when we can engage with you in person again. And there's a question about the vulnerability assessment, and that vulnerability assessment summary will be online soon. We have just provided some updates to that. And so we will make sure that those results are available to help inform your responses to the questions. So thank you all for sharing some time with us tonight. I hope you all are well and enjoy the rest of your week. And remember,